Sure.
Launch meeting.
Yeah.
Who's
Yeah, maximize that.
shares?
That looks so good today.
Hello.
Oh, we gotta admit people first. No one's on the call right now.
Denny Woods is here. How do I share screen? Share screen?
You want to share screen this early?
No,
You
not
don't want
sure.
to have people see your beautiful face as you
No,
introduce them?
Not really.
Admit me. Admit me. Then I gotta do all the.
Okay, I'll stand here. Alex Clark got admitted.
Recording in progress.
Should we just do that the whole time? Send the feedback.
Good morning.
Good morning. Bijou, it's wearing his Sparty green today. Is that
Yeah, we're in sorrow. Morning today.
that's your green sorrowful color, right?
Same. And Eastern lost too, so we're all
Who's the,
sorrowful.
there. Eastern lost, is that the tournament start?
The Central, or no, the Western. Western.
Is that the tournament?
No, it's just a regular game.
Doesn't Dan look comfy?
It's out of Slane.
He's a celebrity. He's in one of those recent golf magazines, wasn't he?
I think so.
By the
yeah.
by the
I
fireplace.
believe so, yeah.
What'd I do?
You were giving some trophy to some guy.
Oh, to Jason.
Yeah. You're a celebrity, Dan.
Oh, geez, what did I do?
Don't admit, Mike.
There I am. Hi, Lee. Hi, Lee Jewett.
Good morning, Dan. I'm cutting, they're cutting the lawn, so I couldn't hear you. Good morning. So
You must be in Florida.
I'm certainly not home.
Well, they build that clubhouse, rebuild that clubhouse yet?
No, they're doing it without me if they are, which is fine.
They're issuing hammers and saws when you get back.
I heard Mike.
I'm a nail guy.
You're looking for volunteers to start the reconstruction of the salvage.
I'm a nail guy, you know, anyone can swing a hammer.
Oh,
So this is the same sign-in every week, okay? There was nobody telling me that. I almost had a deeper creeper situation here.
well, that's what we would expect from you. You can tell me doing better, can't you, Craig?
If you look at last week's email regarding the Zoom link, I think it stated that this is the same link for every week.
I don't know if that's the truth, but
So you must not have read that carefully.
I read the same
KW.
thing, Craig.
What's that, John?
I read the same thing.
You read that too,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it was in English, Mike.
Thanks for the backup, John.
We're not gonna send any emails, and then it's gonna be like a litmus test of who can read it and who can't.
Yeah,
KW didn't get it or Barry didn't get it, so I'm not.
You don't think it has anything to do with desire?
I don't see any new people joining the call yet. I think-
I'm going on vacation in 2 hours.
It got sent, so I mean, hopefully people start to.
You are right. You
Warm down there, Lee.
It is beautiful.
I'm going up to Nubs Knob for 4 days with the grandkids. Is that pretty warm up there?
You're heading the wrong direction then.
You're going the wrong way on 75 there, mister.
There's Barry.
Hi, guys.
Barry,
Barry with his haircut, well, kind of. With his Badger hockey jersey in the back.
And
He's even got it on his sweater too.
did Wisconsin start any more fights yet, Barry?
They did win the championship. So close to it.
Did they start any more ruckuses in the basketball floor?
You really want me to talk about that?
Yeah, Kyle's not on, so please.
Tell us how you really feel.
I don't think my Michigan fans would like my thoughts on that.
I'm on you. I think Juwan Howard, he punched him. He can't punch people.
It was open, it was an open.
Oh,
It
is it?
was a slap. Just a
Just a love tap.
little man boy slap.
Harry, I stand with you and your coach.
No, the coach was doing,
They would have dropped the gloves and then went at it.
coach was like, the Wisconsin coach was like 51% responsible for that ruckus.
You mean simply because he touched him on the arm?
Can I mute you? Can I mute you, these guys?
Good, yeah.
I can mute Barry.
Is that your comment? Because he touched him on the arm?
Hey, Barry, can you hear me?
I said, is that your?
Oh.
You guys are gonna be in a mute ward, like you're
You know that you can unmute yourself, Craig, don't you?
Yeah, you're just gonna start muting.
I can't control you. I can't control the,
Yeah, you control
Oh,
the hard holes. That's how we get even with them, right? The double water holes.
again.
Hey, good morning, everybody. JW.
Good morning.
JW.
Uh,
The GAM office is relocated to Ann Arbor.
JW, apparently we don't know how to read, so. Maybe that's why I make all those fantastic rulings. I should read the book.
Gotta get more pictures.
You guys called me at the exact same time, though. That was fun. Exact same time, you guys.
Hey, Barry, JW, I just started.
I'm slacking on the admit button.
Did he mute himself?
A verbal assist by the moderator would have been helpful.
Thank you, Lee.
I'm sorry for what, where did I miss here, Lee?
Well, it was Craig, or it was Kyle last week, just a reminder that, this is a permanent connection now. And don't delete the email.
That's why I didn't pick it up.
That's it.
No comment, Lee.
All right, okay. Yeah, you gotta remember who you're dealing with us.
I know. I'm just still angry at Wisconsin for being
We moved on.
for
from
winning the
that.
Big Ten and taking all my money this year. So I'm just bitter.
I
So,
understand that, believe me. Well, you got that nice backdrop though, Kyle, for your screensaver.
yeah, I didn't shower yet, so I didn't want to show myself. Just kidding.
There he is.
Oh, go back to the other screen, Kyle.
I just messaged this because they're all gonna start.
but Kyle, it was a good game last night. That was a good win for Michigan. So I feel bad for Michigan State. They're just reeling right now, but Michigan played well.
Yep, 2 more games and they'll be in for sure. So 2 more wins,
Yep.
and then they'll get bounced in the first round of the tournament.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Marv.
Hey,
Morning,
Marv.
Marv. Morning.
Hey, Dan, when did the sign up start for golf days? You know?
We already had one group and we've
Sold out,
got,
Some of them.
we've got
When's the
additional
lineup
ones
sold out?
coming March 16th.
Okay. Somebody asked me the other day and I'd forgotten. So thanks.
Sold out for this.
Everything that's open is sold out.
Wow.
If you get to a wait list at TPC, you'll be 157th in line.
We got 1 spot at the Moors left. So
This call is being recorded, so Barry, be careful how you talk about U of M.
I didn't start that, Craig. You did. So let's not go there, okay?
And it was you saying, I hope you're out to dinner with your family. And then I looked on her phone and it didn't.
Hey, Craig.
Mute yourself as you're talking in the background there, please. Yeah, go ahead.
But it was too late to call you back at the time I saw it.
Morning, Craig. Gary here in Florida. I'm going to mute my mic because I had some electricians working here in the house.
Thank you, Gary.
But, you know, I am slowly but surely.
If you're not, you got noise in the background, please mute yourself.
What did you do yesterday?
Okay, I'm muting everyone, so if you need to talk, you're gonna have to unmute yourself. And it's 10 o'clock, so we're gonna get started. How do I share the screen now?
Yeah, the green button.
And we're going to- So we are gonna be, this will be a pain in the butt to, Okay, 10 o'clock, we're gonna start it. Today, we're gonna try to get through, where's the rules here? I'll get this out of the way.
Wait a minute. Wayne, isn't that where the rules are? Yeah.
Okay, so today, just a reminder, the link that is being used for these Zoom calls is the same link for every week. So it's not going to be the policy to send out an email every week. Just save that email that just came out using the link address in it and use that, and you can be admitted every Wednesday to the rules sessions, okay? So today we are going to be starting on Rule 6, and we're going to try to get through Rule number 9 if we can. So, but at the same time, if you have a question, feel free to raise it and we will address any questions. There's no such thing as a bad question. So I'm sure your question is probably lingering in the minds of many others. So it'll be helpful for everyone to cover that question. So rule number 6 is playing a hole. The purpose of this rule is to talk about how to start the hole from the teeing ground using the same ball for the entire hole, except for those situations where there is relief allowed or a substitution of a ball is also allowed. So the hole starts when you make a stroke to begin the hole. And I want to go to definitions of stroke. So it's a pretty simple definition. It's the forward movement of your club made to strike the ball. So there could be instances where a player starts his forward motion, but does something to miss the ball, either stopping it or maybe swinging over it. Kevin Nod did that one time. I think he swung over the top of the ball intentionally to miss the ball. Well, that is not going to be considered a stroke, and play has not begun for that hole for that player. Yes. No. Yeah, I got it. So, are there any questions on a stroke? Again, we talked about the teeing area. The ball must be played from inside the teeing area. We've talked about teeing area. So this is a basic rule. It says the ball must be played from inside the teeing area. Now in stroke play, you're going to get the general penalty for not playing inside the teeing area, and you must correct the mistake before you start the next hole. Otherwise, that player is going to be disqualified. So teen areas, it's a special area. Get this out of here. We've defined the teen area, 2 club lengths from the very front portion of the tee markers and to the outside edges of the tee markers, including 2 club lengths. Now, I must have missed match play. Where did match play go? In match play, now notice we say that the ball must be played from inside the teen area. However, in match play, there is no penalty for not playing your ball within the teen area, but your opponent may cancel the stroke. And we'll talk about, and I think we talked about that in match play, how you can recall strokes, but it's got to be done. It's got to be recalled before either player makes another stroke at a ball. Now, this comes up every year. If you're assigned a match and you are the referee for a match, it's my contention that you would want to stop a player from teeing outside of the teen area because it is a violation of the rules and you are there to prevent rules violations. Even though there's no penalty associated with that playing from outside the teen area, it's still a potential, it's a rules breach with no penalty assigned to it. And if you want to keep your match harmonious and avoid having a player having his tee shot recalled by his opponent because he teed outside the teen area and he put one 340 down the middle of the fairway, very likely the opponent may want to recall that tee shot, and you may want to avoid those kinds of confrontations between your two players in a match. So my suggestion would be this: if you see a player teeing up from outside the teen area, you should want to stop them from doing that. Okay, the teen area rules. There's one interpretation I want to talk about. 6.1b.1 talks about a ball played from outside the teen area in a match, and the stroke play is not canceled by the opponent. Say a player tees off from outside the teen area and he hits one out of bounds. Well, the player is not going to recall that shot. The player is going to be required to play stroke and distance. But guess what? He's going to play from the same spot where he played his previous stroke from, which was not from within the teen area. So the player whose stroke was not canceled and must replay stroke and distance has to play from the same spot, and he does not get the privileges of playing from within the teen area, which means the ball must be dropped and not moved anywhere within the teen area. He must be dropped and played from the same spot. It could be, who knows where it could be from, but it's not going to be re-teed. It's not going to be moved within the teen area. It's going to be played from the previous spot and dropped. Okay, it's kind of a interesting little quirk on playing stroke and distance from outside the teen area. Even though there's no penalty, well, the player is playing stroke and distance, but there's no penalty associated playing outside the teen area. Everybody clear on that? Kind of a little interesting thing, I would say, from my point of view anyway. So we talked about stroke play. So in stroke play, the ball may be teed or played from the ground. You've seen Laura Davies, how she takes her heel and makes an indentation in the teen area, perfectly permissible within the teen area. There are certain conditions in the teen area that you can improve. You can alter the surface of the ground by making an indentation. You can move, bend, or break grass within the teen area. You can remove or press down sand or soil within the teen area. And in this case, you can also remove, and I think this is one case where you can remove dew, frost, or water in the teen area. You can do that in the teen area. But the player gets the general penalty if he or she takes any other action to improve the conditions affecting the stroke. And we'll talk more about that in Rule 8.1a. I don't generally see anybody moving team areas, team markers in our competitions. And again, the ball is in stroke play. The ball is not in play until the stroke is made. So if a player is going back and say he's looking for his ball out and he hit his tee shot and he did not play a provisional ball, and he hustles back to the teeing area and he tees the ball up, and they find his player's original ball within 3 minutes. That ball, the player is allowed to go play original ball because the ball was teed. It's not in play yet. The ball's not in play until the player makes a stroke at it, which is different from, say, a player making stroke and distance relief in the fairway. Once that player leaves the player's hand, that ball is in play. Even if that original ball is found within 3 minutes, a player making a drop in the fairway, that ball is immediately in play and the original ball becomes out of play. One big
All right,
difference.
Craig,
Yeah, go ahead.
Dan Kunert, I'd like to look at 6.1b2, starting a hole in stroke play.
The interpretation?
No, the
1B2?
language.
Okay, let's see, go back there. Thanks, Dan. Let's do that.
It has happened in GAM events. We had it at St. Clair Golf Club in stroke play qualifying for net match play. And I had it at Plum Hollow during a shotgun. The players went from 12 green to 18 tee. So the language in 6.1b2, starting a hole in stroke play.
Oh, 6.1b2.
In stroke play, if you begin the hole outside of the teeing area, even if you played on the wrong hole or from the wrong tee box, you're disqualified if you hole out and begin another hole. All of the solution to that problem of people using the wrong tee box or turning to the wrong hole is right in 6.1b2 stroke play.
Right. Good point, Dan. Yeah, the teeing area, the defined area, teeing area is one of the specific areas of the course, is only the teeing area of the hole you are playing. So any ball played from outside that is not in play. And as it says here, all the stroke made and any strokes before the mistake is corrected do not count. The player gets a general penalty, but before the player makes a stroke to begin another hole or the final hole of the round or before returning his or her scorecard, the player is going to be disqualified. Is everybody clear on that? Okay,
Thanks.
go ahead.
Thank you, Craig.
Yep, thanks, Dan. So let's see, let's go down here. You know, oftentimes we see, it seems like we talked about a stroke being not a stroke made and not in play. We've seen how recently, a few times, Zach Johnson seems to be notorious for doing this. He's taking his practice swing so close to where his ball is being teed, and he moves the ball. But because that ball is not in play, there's not going to be any penalty for accidentally moving your ball. And
Yeah, Kyle in the chat just posted a video if you guys want to take a look at the situation Craig's describing.
Zach Johnson,
Yeah.
He did it in the Masters last year, and he did it again this year someplace. So the ball used in the play of the hole, the player must use the same ball throughout the hole. There are exceptions when a player can substitute a ball. Where's my cursor here? So the player must hold out with the same ball played from the team area, except when the ball is lost or comes to rest out of bounds. The player substitutes another ball, and that's true whether or not the player is allowed to do so. And the player, it's also the play, we encourage players. I mean, the starters always ask the players to mark their balls. This should be done in all of our competitions, junior, senior, net tournaments, women's, all of our competitions. We need to be asking those players to put an identifier mark on the ball. And if you are near a player that plays a provisional ball, make sure that player uses a different identifier than the ball on the original ball, so the group looking for that ball will be able to distinguish the original ball versus the provisional ball. So when is a player allowed to and not allowed to substitute a ball? Certain rules allow a player to change a ball he or she is using. When taking a relief under a rule, including when either dropping a ball or placing a ball, such as when the ball will not stay in the relief area, a player may use either the original ball or another ball. This is true for every instance when a player is taking relief under a rule. And you'll see, even when a player takes a drop and it does not stay within the relief area, the player drops twice and the player is required to place the ball. Even at that point, when the player goes to place the ball, the player may substitute another ball. It's certainly allowed to do so at that point. The substituted ball becomes the ball in play. When a player substitutes another ball as the ball in play, we're going to look at 14.4 later on. The original ball is no longer in play, even if it is at rest on the course. For example, if a player takes relief from a penalty area, virtual certainty that takes relief, this ball, say, is known or virtually certain to be in a penalty area, and the player takes relief under Rule 17. Again, once that player drops a ball, that's a player's taking relief. He substitutes a new ball, and that if they find the original ball either in the penalty area or outside the penalty area, doesn't matter where, that original ball is no longer in play. This is true even if the player a substituted ball for the original ball when not allowed by the rules. Whether it's replaced, dropped, or placed the substituted ball in the wrong place, in the wrong way, or by using a procedure that does not apply. I can't think of a good example for that right now. But there are situations when the player does make a wrong substitution, and if the ball has not been played, there are ways to correct that, and we're going to cover that under Rule 14. So if a player's original ball has not been found and the player puts another ball in play to take stroke and distance under Rule 17, 18, or 19, or as allowed under a rule that applies, we talked about that in Rule 6. We're going to talk about that in Rule 9, 11, and other rules cover that as well. The player must continue playing with the substituted ball, and the player must not play the original ball, even if found on the course, before the end of the 3-minute search time. If a player does make a stroke at an incorrectly substituted ball, the player makes a stroke, the player gets a general penalty, and the player must continue play with that incorrectly substituted ball through the rest of that. He must play out that hole with that incorrectly substituted ball. Multiple rule breaches result from a single act or related acts. And we go back to, we talked about that under Rule 13C.
Craig, a quick question for you. So if I hit it into the penalty area and I'm not sure exactly where it is and I estimate it, and then I drop the ball, And then after I drop it, but before I hit it, someone in my group finds my ball in the penalty area 20 yards farther up. At that point, because I haven't hit it, I'm still able to change where I drop it. Correct or no?
Yeah, now, we're going to talk about that more in Rule 17, but there's a distinction between a ball virtually certain in the penalty area and not virtually certain. And the options for the players are going to be totally different under those two different scenarios. But if a player does take a drop for a ball virtually certain in the penalty area, and the ball, you're right, Kyle, if the ball is found and it's not played yet, if the ball is found, say 20 yards, 30 yards further up in the penalty area, and that would change the point of where the ball last crossed the edge of the penalty area. Yes, the player would be able to correct that in terms of where he would take relief, but he would still, because the ball was virtually certain in the penalty area, he would, and since the ball was dropped, the original ball still remains out of play, but he would be able to change his reference point for taking relief. Okay?
That's required, not option.
Pardon me?
Required, but not an option. He must take the new reference point.
You're right. I'm sorry. You're right, Marvin. He must change his reference point when he finds that situation. Good point. Thank you. Dr. Foley, do you have a question?
I had a question. I was thinking, wouldn't you first look for your ball if you think it's in the penalty area? So in that case, if you do that and you spend your 3 minutes looking for the ball and don't find it, then isn't it a lost ball at that point? So why would that then indicate where you drop another ball?
That's a good point. Since you're taking relief anyway, I still think you'd be able, I think you still must change your reference point. Since you're going to be bound by taking penalty area relief because you didn't find the ball, I think you're still bound to change your reference point to the new point where the ball crossed the edge of the penalty area.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Robert, in this question or this scenario, we're virtually certain that the ball is in the penalty area, so it's not a lost ball because we're virtually certain that it's in there.
Okay, so we talked about playing an incorrectly substituted ball. Wrong ball, making a stroke at a wrong ball. A player must not make a stroke at a wrong ball. The exception, I've never seen this happen in my years of volunteering. I've never seen a player try to make a stroke at a ball moving in the water. But if the player does so, that is not considered to be making a stroke at a wrong ball. There's no penalty for that. The stroke does not count, and the player must correct the mistake under the rules by playing the right ball from its original spot or taking relief under the rules as provided for a lost ball or if it's not found. I'm gonna get rid of this big down here. This big area.
Well, you gotta scroll up right there. There you go.
Okay. So in playing a wrong ball in match play, the first person to play a wrong ball is going to be lost a hole penalty. So if both the player and the opponent each play the other's ball during the play of a hole, the first player to make a stroke at a wrong ball gets a general penalty. If it's not known, this is interesting, if it's not known who played first with the wrong ball, there's no penalty and the hole must be played as if the ball's played out with the balls exchanged. In stroke play, the player must correct the situation with the wrong ball. If the player continues to play with the wrong ball, all those strokes do not count. The player, once it's known that the player has played a wrong ball, he must go back and correct, and he must correct that before teeing off from the next hole, begin the next hole. Otherwise, or for the final hole around before returning his or her scorecard, the player is going to be disqualified.
Can we go back to Kyle's question for a minute or the discussion on that for just a minute, you don't need to go reverse it, but
Okay,
aren't you allowed anytime that you drop incorrectly or drop in the wrong spot or place the ball in the wrong spot? Aren't you allowed to correct that mistake
yes, you are,
without penalty?
without penalty. And we'll talk more about that in Rule 14. That's true. Are we clear on that? If you're taking relief and you drop in the wrong way or the wrong place, before the ball is played, the player it comes to his attention, his or her attention, that the player took incorrect action on how to drop a ball or where to drop a ball. The player is allowed to correct that. It's a freebie. It's I forget the term we used to call that. What's Jeannie Meyer's term for that? Someone?
The eraser rule,
The eraser rule. There you go.
14.5.
Yep, under 14.5, you can, it's called the eraser rule. We refer to it as the eraser rule. The player is allowed to correct that. I'm going to jump ahead to 6.4, order of play when play begins. GAM has a starting order. When they start hole number 1, that determines the order of play at the first hole. And from there on in, the player who has won the hole has honors and plays next from the teeing area. But we are not, we do not hold players accountable. There's no penalty for playing out of order in stroke play. We talked about that. We encourage them to play ready golf. However, in match play, the order of play is fundamental, and players must play in order. And if a player plays out of turn, the opponent may cancel that stroke and make the player play again. So again, if you are a referee only assigned to a match, not if you are an observer, but if you are assigned to a match, if you've got one assigned match, you are in charge of order of play, and you must be certain to avoid players recalling strokes that the order of play is upheld. And you'll often be asked out on the course to determine the order of play, and you'll have to determine that by usually asking the players to gun it to the flag stick, and that'll determine who the order of play. So in match play, they must play in this order. The honor is decided by the draw of the committee. And starting the hole, the player who wins the hole has the honor at the next teeing area. If the hole was tied, the player with the honor at the previous teeing area keeps it. I mean, you can have a situation where a hole was tied. Say player A has the honors, and the player A maintains the honors throughout the first couple of holes. And on hole 3, for some reason, player B tees off first, and the stroke is not recalled. On hole number 4, if player A realizes the order was not kept properly, player A still has the honors, and player A would tee off on the 4th hole, because player B never won a hole. He just played out of order. He never acquired the honors by winning a hole. So player A keeps the honors and would play first on hole number 4. There's a note here about if a player makes a timely ruling request for a ruling from a committee, it has not been decided by the committee that could affect who has the honor at the next hole. The honor is decided by agreement or by using the random method. I'm not sure when you would have that. I guess I don't know how there'd be a ruling request regarding who has the honors, unless I guess people have totally forgotten who won the last hole and who would have the honors. But so after both players start a hole in match play, the player that is farthest from the hole is to be played first. If the players are the same distance from the hole or the relative distance are not known, the ball to be played first is decided by agreement or by using a random method. It might come down to the fact where you may ask to be flip a coin to determine who's to be played first in that situation. Again, the opponent may cancel the stroke, may not have turned. There's no penalty for it, but the opponent may cancel it and have the shot recalled. It must be done before either player makes another stroke. If the opponent does cancel the stroke, the player must, when it is his or her turn to play a ball from where that stroke was made. There is an exception in match play now. This has recently been added in the 2019 rules, where a player may invite the opponent to play on a turn, or they may agree to the opponent's request to play on a turn. For example, maybe they're out of position and one player has to go to the bathroom to get a quick make a quick break. So the player may invite the player to take the honors. Actually, he's not taking the honors, but he's taking a play out of turn for that hole. So just to save time. And at the next hole, if that hole is tied, the honors would still remain with that player who had the honors for the previous hole. If the opponent makes the stroke on a turn, and if they agree to that, the player has given up the right to cancel the stroke.
Hey, Craig,
Yeah.
have you ever had anybody cancel a stroke in a match?
I had a player who should not have canceled it, but did. I don't know why he did, but he played his opponent played from outside the teeing area, and he put it in the bunker, and the player said, "I want you to replay the stroke." So he did, and he played from the back, and I was the one who let it happen. I felt pretty stupid about it, and the player was playing. They changed tee markers from the morning round to the afternoon round. Well, they changed the location of the tee markers, so they played from a back set of tees, and they should have been playing forward. So the player was able to move up about 20 yards and play from a closer set of tees. So I thought that was a weird situation, but I guess the player is being nice, I guess.
It can get ugly.
So in that case, it certainly didn't get ugly. But if a player shot is recalled, again, it could get ugly out there, and that's something you would definitely want to try to avoid.
Is recalling a shot similar to a concession? It can't be reversed.
I suppose no, I don't think that is. I think your player could probably be talked out of that. Maybe they do rock, paper, scissors for it or something. I don't know.
What do you mean?
I don't think you can cancel
I don't think I don't know why you could cancel. A player probably could change his mind, I think, if you wanted to.
Well, that's just in the scenario you just described. If a guy plays in front of the tee markers and the guy hits it in the bunker and I want you to recall that stroke, and then he looks at it a little bit more and said, "Oh no, maybe I want you to go ahead and play that." Is that allowed? That's my question.
I would think once you've hit it, it's uncancelable. That second stroke.
No, I know once you've hit it, but prior to hitting.
I'll take that question, Lee. I'll try to find out more about it. Okay. We'll check that with the USGA. See if that's a similar situation like a concession.
Hey, Craig.
Yeah,
Craig, real quick, just thinking about that. If we're on a par 3 and it's 150 yards and you hit from the wrong tee, and then I get up and I hit from the correct tee, and I haven't recalled that stroke yet, okay? I mean, if I go up there and it's in the bunker and I don't want to recall, I mean, if I got close to the green, say he was 2 inches from the cup, and and I see where the ball is now on the green, so we're walking up to the green and, oh, by the way, I'm recalling that shot. You got to go back and hit again.
well,
I don't think from reasoning perspective, I think once you do it, it's done. But the question is, how long do I get to be able to do that, to recall that shot?
Okay, take a look up here, right under number 2, paragraph 2, the first bullet point. The recall of player's stroke.
Promptly.
This must be done promptly before either player makes another stroke.
Yep, okay, good,
Okay.
thanks.
Before either player makes another stroke. Thanks, Barry.
Craig,
But
on
I think that then kind of answers Lee's question, doesn't it?
6.4A2, under the bullet points, the second bullet point, I'm sorry, the first bullet point, this must be done promptly before either player makes a stroke. When the opponent cancels a stroke, he or she cannot withdraw the cancellation.
Are you seeing that in the next section, right?
I think it's the same as a concession. Once you give it, you shouldn't be able to recall it.
It says number 2, the opponent may cancel the player's stroke made out of turn.
Where is that in here?
Number 2.
Says cannot cancel the recall once it's made.
Once it's made.
6.4B, Craig.
Yeah, there's under 2. We're trying to find.
Craig,
that.
you gotta go up to A.
6.4A.
Here we are, yeah.
There you go.
Here we are. The player, talking about players canceling the stroke made out of turn. Thanks for pointing it out. If the player plays when it's not the player's turn, there's no penalty, but he may cancel the stroke. It must be done properly. When the opponent cancels the stroke, he or she cannot withdraw the cancellation. So there you go. Thanks.
That makes sense.
So we're down to are we clear on cancellations of strokes and match play and order of play? Any further questions on that? Okay, stroke play, normal order of play. Now this is true in net play, net tournament or gross score. I mean, regular stroke play. The player in the group with the lowest gross score at a whole has the honors. So even in a net tournament, players with the lowest gross score has the honors at the next teeing area. Now that is not true in a match play because if the player wins a hole with a handicap stroke applied, then he or she is going to have the honors at the next teeing area. So the honor is based on gross score even in a handicap competition. There is no penalty for playing out of turn in stroke play. However, if two or more players agree to play out of turn to give one of them an advantage, each of them gets the general penalty, 2 strokes. We encourage ready golf, but we also encourage them to play safely. I think it's written that way on our hard card. Where we talk about play safely, we play ready golf. We jump down to 6.4C. Did I got I'm gonna pass it already tonight. The order of play for provisional balls is that all players must make their first stroke on a hole before the other players play the provisional ball or another ball from the teeing area. Now, if one or more players play a provisional ball, the order of play is the same as before. For a provision ball played or another ball played out of turn, we can talk about that in Rule 6. We talked about that already. When a player takes relief or will play a provisional ball from anywhere except the teeing area, the order of play under Rule 6.4A1, 6.4B1, or in these 2 cases is taking relief to play the ball from a different place where it lies. When a player becomes aware that he or she is required to take stroke and distance relief, the order of play is based on the spot where his or her previous stroke was made. When a player has a choice to play the ball as it lies or to take relief, the order of play is based on the spot where the original ball lies, which, if not known, must be estimated. This applies even when the player has already decided to take stroke and distance relief or to take relief from a different place than where the original ball lies, such as when the original ball is in a penalty area or will be treated as unplayable. You'll see this happen, and it's happened in a few times, and the announcers were very confused by this. It happened in, I think maybe the Ryder Cup, and it's happened in some of the GAM tournaments too, where you've got two players in a match, and there's a penalty area, say lying short of the green, and one player decides to try to drive the green and ends up just short of the green, but in the penalty area. The other player sees this and plays it short in the middle of the fairway, about 100 yards out. Well, the order of play is determined where the original spot of the ball lies. So even though the player in the fairway is 100 yards out, the player whose ball, and say the player who has to take relief has to drop 150 yards back from the hole. So in essence, the player who's taking relief would be further back than the ball lying in the fairway. The player whose ball lies 100 yards out, the order of play is for that player to play first, and then the player who's taking relief from the penalty area. Is everybody clear on that? It's where the original ball lies that determines the order of play, regardless of the ball's in the penalty area or in the middle of the fairway. No questions? Okay.
Craig, so the way I usually think about that is that if you are walking towards a green, the player who is lying at 150 yards, you're going to get to that ball before you get to the green. And then you get to the green area, and the ball that somebody is taking relief from, they may decide to go past where the 150-yard ball was lying in the first place, right? Because the guy near the green doesn't have access to the ball until the one in the fairway hits first. Is that a way to think about it?
I think it's just best in this, we're talking about match plays. You just presume that the player can play the ball. So even if the ball is in a foot of water right by the green, you presume that he can play it. And that's why the player who's 150 yards out in the fairway would play first. You always presume that the player can play the ball. And if then in fact the player is in water and has to take relief back on the line, that's how the order goes. You just presume that the player can play their ball, even if they can't. And that's how the order play goes for match play.
Okay, so basically, until we get to the ball near the green, we don't really know whether the player is going to play it or not.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, all right, thanks.
So completing a hole, the player completes a hole when the player, in match play, when the player holds out, or the next stroke is conceded, and conceded cannot be recalled. If a player has his next putt conceded, there's no penalty for the player to continue to putt. The player is done with the hole. He's not going to be penalized, or that stroke is not going to count if he makes a practice stroke with that ball. Or if the opponent's score is lower than the player possibly could make, the opponent gets a general penalty loss of play. If it's decided that the player concedes the hole, the opponent's score for the hole is lower than the player possibly could make, or the player or opponent gets a general penalty loss of hole. So when the hole is over, when his opponent gets a general penalty. Under stroke play, players must always hole out under Rule 3-3. And that needs to be, if a player does not hole out, player needs to correct that before teeing off on the next teeing area. All right, that concludes rule number 6. Moving on to rule number 7.
Hey, Craig,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to just bring up something for a second. Last week, there was a question about sanding a scuff ball. I've spoken to the USJ, that is not allowed. The first time would be a warning. The second time would be a general penalty. By the same token, if the surface of the ball is deliberately changing player characteristics, such as like putting a substance on or something like that, playing that ball is an immediate disqualification.
The first time would be a warning. I'm surprised it'd be a,
The sanding, like talking about a player's ball hit the cart path. Somebody brought up that the player sanded the ball and smoothed it out. That would be a warning first time.
Okay.
Second time would be general penalty.
Okay. Thanks, Marv. All right, we're going to move on to rule number 7, ball search, finding, and identifying the ball. Okay, the purpose of this action, the purpose of this rule is to allows a player to take reasonable actions to fairly search for his or her ball in play after each stroke. The player must still be careful, as penalty will apply if the player takes excessively actions or causes improvements to the conditions affecting his or her next stroke, as we'll talk about in rule number 8. Player gets no penalty if the ball is accidentally moved in trying to find or identify it. But the ball must then be replaced on its original spot. So if a player is smart and he calls you over and asks that, hey, I moved my ball, and if the player is smart, you'll say, well, how did, you say, well, how did it happen? If the player is smart, he's gonna say, well, I was searching for it. It gives the player a little freedom to avoid penalty, but obviously the ball would have to be located in some high rough in order for you to believe that the ball was being searched for in that instance. So a player is responsible for finding his or her ball in play after each stroke. The player may take actions to find and identify it, such as moving sand and water, moving, bending grass, bushes, tree branches, or other things, or attach natural objects. Even by breaking such objects, but only if such breaking is a result of other reasonable actions taken to find or identify the ball. I guess if a player is walking into a wooded area and breaks a branch, trying to walk into an area and breaks a branch, would not be considered a rules violation. But taking such reasonable actions, if their actions as part of fair search improves the conditions affecting the stroke, there is no penalty under Rule 8.1 for the improvements from a fair search. But if the improvements result from actions that are exceeded what was necessary or reasonable, the player is going to get the general penalty for breach of Rule 8.1a. The player may remove loose impediments as allowed under Rule 15 and may remove movable obstructions as allowed also in Rule 15. If you've got a player's looking in bunkers and they can't find their ball, they got 3 minutes to find the ball. Otherwise, the ball is going to be lost. Even if they know the ball is virtually certain in the penalty in the bunker, they need to find the ball and identify it in order to continue play with that original ball. So they're going to be digging like crazy in a bunker, and if they do find it, the player is going to have to recreate the original lie, but may leave a small part of the ball visible if the ball had been totally covered by sand. If the player does not recreate the original lie, the player is going to get the general penalty. There are different ways on how to identify a ball. You can identify them in one of these ways. If by the player or anyone else seeing a ball come to rest in circumstances where it is known to be the player's ball, or by seeing the identifying mark, or by finding a ball with the same brand, model, or number and condition of the player's ball in an area where the player's ball is expected to be. So if the player does not mark the ball, and if typically a junior tournament. If he's looking for a ball and he finds a ball, it's his ball, you're gonna allow the player to play that original ball if it is his same brand, model number and condition of the player's ball, as long as there's not another ball just like it, say 5 yards away. In that case, if there's another ball 5 yards away, then both balls are going to be identified as being lost. If a player's ball cannot be distinguished from his or her original ball, there's special circumstances for that, depending upon where the balls each ball lies. And we'll talk about that under Rule 18 for lost ball and provisional ball. So once you find a ball, the player says, "Hey, this is my ball, and I cannot identify it." You're gonna be there to help the player identify it. The player may lift the ball to identify it, but the player must first mark the ball. The player always has to mark the ball before he lifts it to identify it, to see if it's cut or cracked, or to see if it's embedded. It must, if any ball to be replaced, must always be marked before being lifted or being rotated. Even rotated on the putting green is not permissible without first marking the ball. If the ball has been lifted and it is the player's ball or another player's ball, it must be replaced on its original spot under Rule 14.2. We'll talk about that. It must be replaced on its original spot. But in the case of replacing the ball, say there's a clunk of mud on it, it does not need to remain in the same, how do I say it, directional spot where that clunk of dirt was. If the clunk of dirt is on the top of the ball, the player would, in replacing the ball, the player would be allowed, say, to rotate that clunk of mud to either the right or the left, but not the bottom. The bottom of the ball must maintain its virtual distance when the ball is being replaced. So it would not be able to be like re-teed on that clunk of mud. So if the player lifts the ball and cannot identify it without doing a bit of cleaning of it, the player is allowed to clean the ball necessary to identify it. And if the player fails to mark the ball before lifting it or cleaning it when not allowed, it's going to be one penalty stroke for the player. Under 7.4, we're up to 7.4. If the ball, lifting the ball to identify it, there's no penalty for there's no penalty in accidentally moving the ball or opponent when trying to find it or trying to identify it. If that happens, the ball must be replaced on its original spot, and it's always the ball. Notice how it says the ball versus a ball. It's a big distinction between in the rule book when you see a ball versus the ball. When you see the ball, we're always talking about the original ball. When you see a ball, it means the original ball or another ball could be substituted. We talked about sand.
Craig?
Yes, sir.
One of our kids asked me, I think it was at Forest Acres East. The ball is in the penalty area in some grass. And the question was, before picking it up to identify it, could you mark it in the penalty area so you are sure that you put it in the right place? Is there a ruling on that? I don't remember whether marking the ball in the penalty area generates a penalty or not.
No, the player, it used to be that players were allowed to play a wrong ball from a bunker or penalty area, but they've changed that rule. So because they do allow you to mark the ball, regardless whether it be in a bunker or penalty area in order to identify it.
Okay,
There's no distinction between where you're allowed to mark the ball in order to identify it.
okay, thanks. Somebody has said that only if it's in the general area. So that's why I was asking that question.
Okay, that covers Rule 7.4. Any other questions on Rule 7? Okay, we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break and we'll get into Rule 8, okay? Be back here at 10:59 and 7 seconds.
Hey, Alex, I got a question for you.
Go ahead, he's listening. He's all captive.
Hey, I got rid of my picture because I wanted to leave to get some coffee. How do I get my picture back on? I had to go and relaunch the meeting.
Oh, you mean like your face?
Yes, my picture, my face.
We took a vote while you were gone.
Yeah, can we vote? Let's vote on that.
So I think as a rule, that's the penalty. If you leave the meeting early, you can't re-show your face. So I can't help you this week, Michael.
I had to leave. I had to submit my bid for Oakland Hills for a rebuild.
No, it's already been approved. We've approved it. I mean, if you really want to see your face, just go to
The bathroom.
there you go. See.
Well, Lee, the local news is throwing the contractor under the bus, saying they found propane tanks at the clubhouse.
I saw that, I read that. I don't know which contractors it would have been. Oh, I know there was somebody, we were planning on renovating our front porch, golf course side porch and patio. So it could have been those guys, but I don't know why they would have needed to have access to the clubhouse area.
Well, from what I gather, or what I'm thinking, they were using they were doing stonework or something, and they were probably heating the tent area where they were working or something, and somehow the torches got too close to the walls and started a fire inside the wall. That's the only thing I could think of. But
well, that's possible. I don't know why I didn't see any tents visible in any of the videos that I saw. And again, I wasn't over there, so I don't know, but that, to me, that complicates things, whether the contractors are, I'm guessing that the contractors may not have had enough insurance. So now there's going to be a battle between insurance companies over who's liable and what the coverage is gonna be and you know, I've heard all sorts of wild estimates about the cost to reconstruct the clubhouse, so.
Yeah, I heard 100 million, but
Well, I've heard half of that, but I hadn't heard 100 million, but so it was 12 million when we renovated it in 2000.
okay.
So, and that included the new first tee building and a new pro shop, so.
Okay.
Being an expert on this, just going through it for the last 3 years. We spent 14.5 million, almost 15 million. And we were 35,000 square feet.
Yeah, ours is 110,000.
Yeah.
My guess is now with, you know, with all the additional costs and everything, I think that'd be 50 or 60 million probably.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll get it done inside of 4 years.
Mhm.
Well,
Because it took us over 2 years to settle the insurance claim. I mean, when we start getting into it, the content of everybody, what they had in their lockers and all the rest of it. Now we had a 2-month delay on, are you going to use the same floor or the foundation? There was a fight between contractors and the insurance company for 2 months over that. It's amazing what you get into.
well, wouldn't be surprised, and I would have hoped that those kinds of issues wouldn't come to it'd be a hell of a lot simpler to say, here's the money, you guys do what you want with it, but.
Yeah, let me tell you that, as they say, that ain't happening.
Okay, we're all back. We're going to get started again. We're going to talk about Rule 8. Rule 8 is the course played as it's found. As we've talked about before, you play the course as it is, and you play the course, you play the ball as it lies. There are some videos on the USGA website under education, and you find some different videos, very, very brief and very somewhat helpful, but very basic videos that are very short. And you may want to scroll through these, especially some of the newer volunteers, and just get an idea of kind of the rules we're talking about. So here's the rules of golf explained. Play in the course as you find it.
How many times have you heard the expression, play your ball as it lies? Or play the course as you find it? But what does that really mean? The short answer is you can't make improvements that might help you gain an advantage as you get ready to play. That includes the area where your ball lies, how you position your body when taking a stance, or your intended swing, and anywhere along your line to the hole. This is true even in the relief area where a ball would be dropped or placed. Examples include pressing a club on the ground to improve your lie, moving, bending, or breaking anything growing or permanent, smoothing out your path to the hole, brushing away sand or loose soil, or dew, frost, or water.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's pretty basic stuff. But this rule now is, you're going to encounter a lot more ruling issues under Rule 8 than maybe other rules that we've talked about so far, because the purpose of the rule, it covers the central principle of playing the course as you find it. Players are very, they're going to ask you for relief. They're going to want to know what they can do, or they're going to take actions that improve their line of play or their lie of the ball. So when the player's ball comes to rest, he or she normally has to accept the condition affecting the stroke and not improve them before playing the ball. However, there are certain actions a player can take if they are reasonable to improve those conditions. But there are limited circumstances where those conditions may be restored without penalty after they've been improved or worsened. So in some conditions, if they've taken a condition and they've improved it, it's possible they can avoid penalty under certain conditions if they restore that condition. So you'll talk about conditions affecting the stroke. Oftentimes people refer to this as acronym of CATS, conditions affecting the stroke. It's an abbreviation for conditions affecting the stroke. It's to support the principle of the play of the course as you find it. It restricts players on what they can do to improve any of these protected conditions. And these conditions are those 5 things as you notice, as they notice in the video. It's the lie of the ball at rest, the area of the player's intended stance, the intended swing, or the player's line of play, and the relief area where the player will drop or place a ball. So this rule applies to actions taken during the round and while play is stopped under Rule 5.7a. Shoot. Okay, it does not apply to removal of loose impediments or movable obstructions, which is allowed to the extent of the rules provided in Rule 15, or any action taken while a player's ball is in motion, which is covered in Rule 11. So these are actions that are not allowed, except in limited ways allowed in Rule 8.1b, C, and D. A player must not take any of these actions if they improve the conditions affecting the stroke. Move, bend, or break any growing or attached natural objects. Okay, so that doesn't apply to loose impediments. Got to be growing or natural objects. You'll see that sometimes we talked about, there's a, you'll see this has come up in discussion in the past where a person is in the woods and there's a fallen tree. A fallen tree is a large loose impediment as long as it's not attached. If it's still attached to the stump, by definition, that is a growing or attached natural object and cannot be moved to improve any of the conditions affecting the stroke. You cannot move, bend, or break any immovable obstruction, integral object, or boundary object, or tee marker for the teeing area for which the playing a ball from the teeing area. Now that only applies, somewhere it talks about that only applies to the first stroke being made on the hole, I believe. You are not allowed to move a loose impediment or movable obstruction into position, such as to build a stance or to improve a line of play. One of the players got into trouble out on the tour. I think it was Lee Westwood's or Pat Clark. Was it Clark? It was Clark. Right, Clark? Yeah. His caddy took trying to remove a birdhouse, which was defined as an immovable obstruction. He tried to make it a movable obstruction, and obviously player was penalized 2 strokes for that.
Craig.
It was Darren Clark.
Craig,
Yeah.
in your example of the fallen tree that's attached or not attached. So if my ball is in the woods or near, even if it's not in the woods, near a fallen tree, and it's not attached to the trunk, can I move a branch? Can I break off a branch on a fallen tree that's completely detached from its stump?
Good question, Lee. And the answer to that is yes. The entire object is a loose impediment as well as part of it. So if the player wants to break off part of that branch, Don Shepherds will talk about that. It's perfectly allowed.
But if it's attached, if it's still attached, then you could not.
If it's attached to the trunk, like you say, it is not. It's still an attached object, so it is not defined as a loose impediment, and as such cannot be moved to improve any of your conditions affecting the stroke.
Thank you.
Craig,
Yeah.
you know, that happened to me last year. I think you were there at the GAM tournament up in Boyne. One of the participants hit it into the woods, into a bunch of branches of a fallen dead tree. It looked like it had been dead for 10 years. And him and his other partners moved the branches out of the way, and he made a stroke. And Next day, I went over there and looked, and lo and behold, at the base of the tree, there was still a piece of bark that was attached to the bottom of the tree. So in actuality, he should have got a penalty.
Yeah, I mean, by definition, I would say you're absolutely right, Mike. You would have gotten a penalty. Good thing you weren't on the ball when you were the day before, right?
I helped him move the damn tree.
So let's see, up to number 2, you cannot move a loose impediment or move, we talked about 2. You are not allowed to alter the surface of the ground, including by replacing divots in a divot hole. This can be a tough one for the players. They probably don't realize that, but divots are loose impediments, and they cannot be replaced into their divot hole to unless, of course, it's something that does not affect their conditions of the stroke. If they're caring for the course, they can do that. You cannot remove or press down divots that have already been replaced or other cut turf that is already in place. Now, it's somewhat subjective in determining whether a divot has been replaced or not, depending upon how it looks, I guess, in the in the divot hole to begin with. If a divot is partially, say, sideways in a divot hole, I would say that has not been replaced. I might be willing to classify that as a loose impediment still. But if it's mostly replaced in the divot hole, the player is not allowed to remove it or press it down to improve any of the conditions affecting the stroke. Players are not allowed to create or eliminate holes, indentations, or uneven surfaces. They're not allowed to remove or press down sand or loose soil in the general area. Or remove dew, frost, and water anywhere except in the teeing area. Penalty for that breach of Rule 8.1a is a general penalty. There are some good examples here, and I'm going to go to the interpretations for Rule 8.1a. Let's see here. Shoot. Just want to point out some good examples for people to go through. Take the necessary time to read through the interpretations you find here under 8.1a/1, examples of actions that are likely to create a potential advantage. Say your player's repairing a pitch mark pretty much very, very close to the ball and in front of where his or her ball lies, and it may be a stroke that's going to be a low running stroke, then you definitely want to consider that as improving the player's line of play, or in bunkers, improving footsteps, smoothing footsteps in front of the ball. But in 8.1a/2, if the action is say not near the ball or should not affect the line of play, for example, a player taking a full shot, 150-yard approach shot, if your player repairs a small pitch mark or a footprint in a bunker several yards in front of the ball, I would not consider that to be a rules violation. There's a chat here. Let's see. When taking relief on, here's a question from Charles. When taking relief on a pine straw, leaves, or wood chips, are there restrictions for modifications of a drop area, including cleaning area down to ground level? Pine straw, leaves, and wood chips are loose impediments, so those can be moved and just like any other in a general area, or if it's they can be moved in the drop area, correct? If the player has a drop area where he's taking relief, if the player wants to smooth those things down to a ground level, those would all be considered loose impediments and can do so, Charles. All right. Are you good, Charles? So we talked about 8.1a/2, examples of actions unlikely to create a potential advantage. Read through that. There's some good examples.
shoot.
In 8.1A3, it talks about a person improving conditions, even if a different stroke is made. And there's an example here, say in the teen area, someone breaks off a branch in the teen area and it improves, I don't know what, I don't, probably leads you at set the T markers on this hole, and there's a tree branch in the way. The player breaks off a tree branch to the far right extreme portion of the teen area. And then the player gets told that, hey, you can't do that. So the player moves his or her tee to a different portion of the teen area. The player is not going to be avoid getting a penalty by changing the location of his tee or playing the ball in a different direction or by taking relief to a different location to the point where the tree branch would not have had any effect on the stroke. This applies to a player who broke a branch when starting her hole and moved to a different location within the teen area. We talked about, we'll get to 8.1C where we talk about where penalties can be avoided by restoring improved conditions later on.
Quick question. This is
Yes,
Doug.
sir?
Not the tree branch, but I've been in situations where there's on a tee box and there's heavy grass growing at the front end of that tee box. That you can't break that or cut that grass down or tromp it down. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You asked Phil Mickelson about that, right? You thinking of Phil Mickelson?
Yeah.
He did that on one hole, and he must have stepped down some high grass in front of the teen area. The teen area is protected, but outside that teen area, it is not protected. I mean, it is protected from improvement. You can make improvements in the teen area, but not outside. So even if Phil were to, had he changed his teen location, he still would have been penalized for making that correction in a net by bending those natural objects. Okay, we're going to go back to the rules now. Let's see, back to rules. Let me get back there.
That one up there. You click on that. You're scrolling down 8, right?
Yeah. Okay, where are we at here? Where we leave off? 8.1. We're up to 8.1B. Where's 8.1B? Here we are. Actions that are allowed. In preparing for or making a stroke, a player may take any of these actions and there is no penalty, even if doing so improves the conditions affecting the stroke. You can fairly search for the ball, as we talked about. You can take actions to remove loose impediments. We could go down to definitions and look at definitions. Let's look at definitions of loose impediments. Again, in these definitions, this is where definitions come into are very important in determining what actions can be done and what actions can't be done. So a loose impediment is any unattached natural object such as stones, loose grass, leaves, branches, and sticks, dead animals, and animal waste. Worms, insects, and similar animals that cannot be removed easily, and the mounds or webs that they build, such as worm casts and anthills, are also considered loose impediments. Clumps of compacted soil, including aeration plugs, are loose impediments. Natural objects are loose impediments. Natural objects are not loose if they are attached or growing solidly embedded in the ground that cannot be picked up easily, or sticking to the ball. So if you've got wet grass sticking to the ball, that player is not going to be allowed to remove that grass sticking to the ball, because those are not considered loose impediments and would affect the lie of the ball. Special cases. Sand and loose soil are not loose impediments, except for, you'll find you can improve that on the putting green. Dew, frost, and water are not loose impediments, except you can improve that in the teeing area. Snow and natural ice, other than frost, are either loose impediments or, when on the ground, temporary water at the player's option. So snow and natural ice are loose impediments or temporary water at the player's option. The player gets to choose. Spider webs are loose impediments, even though they are attached to another object. So it's a special case. If you got a spider web attached to a tree, that is going to be considered a loose impediment, kind of a bit of an exclusion for the attached rule. But spider webs are considered to be loose impediments. Okay. Any questions on loose impediments? Where'd my cursor go? There it is. Where are we at? 1B. My mentor here is keeping me track of where I am and where I gotta go. So we talked about moving loose impediments, we looked at the definition. Okay, a player is also allowed to take reasonable actions to mark the spot of the ball and to lift it and replace the ball under rules 14.1 and 14.2. And if in doing so, the ball moves, taking that action, there's no penalty to the player in taking taking relief actions. We'll talk more about that in Rule 9. The player is also allowed to ground the club lightly in front of or right behind the ball. And there's an interpretation of that in 8.1b/1 you can look at, but it means basically allowing the weight of the club to be supported by the ground, the grass, or other material on the ground. But if the player takes excessive action to improve the lie by pressing down the club more than lightly, that's going to be considered a rules breach of Rule 8. So this does not allow pressing the club down on the ground, or when a ball is in the bunker, touching the sand right in front or right behind the ball. And we'll see more of that in Rule 12 of the bunkers. The player does not allow the player to firmly place the feet in taking a stance, including, wait a minute, is this? Okay, this is part of Rule 4, number 5, what's allowed. Player is allowed to firmly place the feet in taking a stance, including a reasonable amount of digging in with the feet in sand or loose soil. Player is allowed fairly to take a stance by taking reasonable actions to get to the ball and take a stance. There's also there's some interpretations under Rule 8.1b/3. I'm not going to go there because I can't find my way back easily enough, but you can go to that interpretation. Well, I'll go there. I'm not being, I hate this thing. I didn't go up as far as I go. Go back and forth on this thing. Okay, 8.1b/3 we're looking for. There's a lot of interpretations under Rule 8. I encourage everyone to go through the interpretations and go through them carefully and get more familiar with what they allow you to do and what they don't allow you to do. So 8.1b/3 talks about fairly taking a stance. And even though the player is allowed to play in any direction, he or she is not entitled to a normal stance or swing and must adapt to the situation and use the least intrusive course of action. And that's the advice I give a player when player's ball is under a tree and they ask the referee, how do I go in and take my stance? You advise them that they must use the least intrusive course of action. And then they'll ask you, and then you've got to define intrusive. So basically it tells you that I guess the least movement of the tree branch is the least intrusive action on where a player, the direction the player needs to go to find his or her stance in order to make the player's stroke. Examples of actions that are considered fairly taking a stance and are allowed, even if some actions result in improvement, include backing into a branch or a boundary object when that is the only way to take a stance. For example, if you've got a boundary object, it's a fence that's leaning over and it's leaning over a little bit, the player is allowed to back into that boundary object and move it in order for the player to make their stroke. Even if this moves the branch or boundary object out of the way or causes it to bend or break. The player is allowed to bend a branch with his or her hands to get under a tree to play a ball when that is the only way to get under the tree to take a stance, as long as that branch does not interfere or bending or breaking that branch does not improve the player's stroke or line of play or swing. Stroke, I should say.
Craig, how do you really make the judgment call between 8.1 B3 and 8.1 B4? 3 says that you can't, that you get to take a stance and you can kind of back into that branch. And then 4 says, deliberately moving the branch with your leg. How do you deal with that?
Well, and that's why I say I tell the player to take the least intrusive action, because you will see players try to take advantage and step into a branch and move it. And maybe your suggestion would be, okay, try backing in from a different direction to see if that branch moves the least. I mean, if that's the only way for the player to get in there, and the branch does move that to the point where it may improve the stroke a little bit or improves the stroke a lot. If that's the only way, I guess it's going to be it's a judgment call, and it's a tough call, Dan. I agree. But if you're there, you'll probably notice it when you see a player what the player is doing. If the player swings his leg around to move a branch, maybe your suggestion would be, I'm sorry, you can't do that. You've got to maybe you've got to step over the branch and take your stance by stepping over it. Because there are examples where in 8.1.4 talks about not fairly taking a stance, as Dan mentioned, by deliberately moving, bending, or breaking branches with a hand, leg, or the body to get them out of the way. See, and it'll probably become apparent to you if you see a player doing that. There's probably a better way for the player to get in and take a stance, his or her stance, without bending, moving, or breaking that branch.
I've got a note in my rule book that says keep hands on the club to take your stance. This is a guideline.
That's a good point, Lee. It's a good rule of thumb. Thanks.
Hey, Lee.
Yeah.
Question for Lee?
I'm just explaining that Genie always taught me to have the player put their hands on the club, back into that area, without swinging their arms to move anything. And if something breaks while they're doing that, and they're not swinging their arms or their legs, that's fine. But if they start swinging their arms and their legs to move branches and things, and they break, then they got a problem.
Okay, thanks. We talked about how a player can avoid penalty by restoring conditions improved in the breach of 8.1A1 or 8.1A2. So if a player has improved the conditions affecting the stroke by moving, bending, or breaking an object, there is no penalty if before making the stroke, the player eliminates that improvement by restoring the original conditions in the ways allowed in 1 and 2 below. But if the player improves the conditions and by taking any of the actions covered by rules 8.1A 3 through 5, so it's important to know what's in 1 and 2 and what's in 3 and 5. So under rules 1 and 2, you can correct the condition, you can restore them. Under rules 8.1A 3 through 5, you cannot avoid penalty, even if you restored the original condition or tried to. So in 1, how do you restore the conditions? By moving or bending? Well, you restore them by moving the original object back as nearly possible to its original position, so the improvement created by the breach is eliminated. Remember in the olden days, once you removed a boundary object, you were penalized. Well, nowadays you can replace that boundary object so that you're going to be not get a penalty as long as it's in its original position. Say after it's been moved or moved out of its way, you need to restore it back to its original position. You can return a tree branch or grass or an immovable obstruction to its original position after it has been moved. But the player cannot avoid penalty. That's if the improvement is not eliminated, such as it's been broken or changed in a significant way so that it cannot be returned to its original position, or by using anything other than the original object itself in trying to restore a condition, such as using a different or additional object, such as by replacing a different stake in the hole, or by using other materials to repair the original object, by using tape to repair a boundary object or a branch. That's not going to do it. How to restore the condition by improving or by moving an object into position. Before making a stroke, the player may avoid penalty by removing the object that was moved into position. That's if the player had moved a condition to improve a position. So if you move an object to improve your position, just make sure that object gets removed and that penalty would be avoided. Under section D, restoring conditions worsened after ball came to rest. If a condition affecting the stroke are worsened after the player's ball came to rest, restoring that worsened condition is going to be allowed. Oftentimes you'll see that when a player ball is on the fringe and his ball is at rest, and a player who makes a stroke after that player hits his ball and hits his or her ball into the fringe and makes a large divot hole in front of the ball, and that player's ball was at rest prior to that divot hole being there. That divot hole can be repaired because that was worsened after the player's ball came to rest. So if the conditions affecting the stroke are worsened by any person other than a player or by an animal or artificial object, without penalty, the player may restore the original condition as nearly as possible. The player may have to mark the spot of the ball and lift it. And it's the ball, clean and replace the ball on its original spot under rules 14.1 and 2. And if it is reasonable to do so, restore the original conditions if the materials ended up on the ball when the conditions were worsened. A lot of times you'll see that with sand on the ball. When a player's, a player behind the player's ball, there's a shot out of the bunker, the player is going to be allowed to lift up, mark his ball, lift the ball, clean the sand off, and even restore the conditions by brushing that sand off the fringe and to restore the condition of what the ball lied before that player made that stroke. If the worsened condition cannot be easily restored, lift and replace the ball by placing it on its nearest spot, not near the hole, that has the most similar conditions affecting its stroke, and that spot is within 1 club length of its original spot and is in the same area of the course as that spot. Here's an exception here. If the lie of the ball is worsened when or after a ball is lifted or moved and before it is replaced, this is covered under 14.2D, unless the lie was worsened when the play was stopped and the ball was lifted, in which case this rule applies. The restoration of worsened condition is not allowed. The conditions affecting the stroke are worsened by the player, by a natural object, or by natural forces, such as wind and or water. The player must not improve those worsened conditions in breach of Rule 8.1a, except under Rule 8.1c 1 through 3.
Greg, there is a study question on that point. 2 balls in the bunker. The player marks and lifts his ball, interfering with the other player's ball, and he creates a dome of sand because the player created that and worsened his conditions. He cannot smooth that sand out.
And I believe you need to restore the condition. In that case, you're restoring the condition on its original spot. You're not allowed because you can rake and restore the condition. I think that's probably found in the bunker rule. You're not given that one club length option. It's got to be on the original spot when you restore that. Thanks, Dan.
If the player worsened the conditions, though, you can't.
If the player, his or herself worsens the conditions, then yeah. For example, say the player, the ball lies in the bunker, and the player takes actions to walk in front of his or her ball to retrieve a rake. Those are conditions affecting the stroke that may or that will not be able to be repaired. The player would not be able to improve, rake those footprints because the player, his or herself made those footprints. Okay, I believe we are moving right along in Rule 8.1. We're down to 8.2. Did we cover 8.2 or not? 8.2 covers players' deliberate actions to alter other physical conditions that affect his or her ball at rest or the stroke to be made. This rule does not apply to players' actions to deliberately deflect or stop his or her ball. That's going to be covered under Rule 11. It does not apply to alter the player's conditions affecting the stroke, which is covered under Rule 8.1. Prohibited actions to alter other physical conditions. The player must not deliberately take actions listed in Rule 8.1a to alter any or such physical conditions to affect where the player's ball might go or come to rest after his or her next stroke or later stroke. Or where the player's ball might go or come to rest if it moves before the stroke is made. For example, when a ball is on a steep slope and the player is concerned that it might roll into a bush, the player cannot take actions to say, break that bush or pull out that bush if the player thinks that ball might roll there before the player makes the next stroke. Now, there is an exception to alter the care for the course. There's no penalty under this rule if the player alters any such physical conditions to care for the course, such as smoothing footprints in a bunker or replacing a divot in a divot hole, as long as you feel in your good judgment that it does not affect the player's conditions affecting the next stroke. Penalty for breach of Rule 8.2 is general penalty. Eight three, players' deliberate actions to alter physical conditions to affect another player's ball. 8.3 applies when a player takes deliberate actions to alter physical conditions to affect another player's ball at rest or the stroke to be made by the next player. It does not apply. Again, it talks about a ball in motion. That's covered under Rule 11. Prohibited actions to alter other physical conditions. Player must not deliberately take any of these actions listed in Rule 8.1a, except as allowed under Rule 8.1b C, or D to improve or worsen the conditions affecting the stroke of another player, or alter any physical conditions that can do it to affect where another player's ball might go, come to rest, or where another ball players might come to rest if it moves before making the next stroke. The same situation applies to your ball or another player's ball. Breach of rule under 8.3 is general penalty.
I got a question.
Any questions on 8.3? Go, yeah, question.
I have a question, quick one. This happened up at the high school tournament qualifier at Saginaw. Not a well-kept course. Crabgrass growing on the edge of the green in the line of the person's putt. Wanted to know if he could pull it. We said no. I think what happened was that he convinced somebody else to pull
it. Smart. Obviously, you can't direct someone else to do a rules violation. You're in a breach of a rule if you do that.
General penalty.
General penalty for that, right? Improve the line of play. Okay, rule number 9. This is a good rule. A lot of actions. You're going to see a lot of Rule 9 questions and incidents out on the golf course when you're out there. The purpose of the rule is to talk about the central principle of the game: play the ball as it lies. If a player's ball comes to rest and is then moved by natural forces, such as wind or water, the player normally must play it from its new spot. In natural forces, there's a definition for that, but it's pretty simple. It talks about just it's wind or water. Well, let's go quick to the definition. Natural forces. It's the effects of nature, such as wind, water, or when something happens for no apparent reason because of the effects of gravity. Okay. Shoot. Here we go. If a ball at rest is lifted or moved by anyone or any outside influence before the stroke is made, the ball must be replaced on its original spot. Players should take care when near any ball at rest, and a player who causes his or her own ball or opponent's ball to move will normally get a penalty, except on the putting green. Rule 9 applies to a ball in play at rest on the course, and applies to both during the round and while play is stopped under Rule 5.7a. Now, it's important to determine who causes the ball to move, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Ball is played as it lies. A player's ball at rest on the course must be played as it lies, except when the rules allow to play a ball from a different place on the course or to lift the ball and then replace it on its original spot, such as checking to see if it's yours, checking to see if it's cut or cracked, checking to see if it's embedded. Those are situations where a ball will be lifted, marked first, and then lifted and replaced on its original spot. If a ball moves during the player's backswing, the stroke of the backswing, and the player continues on and does make a stroke, the ball must not be replaced no matter what caused the ball to move. Instead, the player plays the ball from where it came to rest after the stroke. The stroke is going to count, and then you need to determine what caused the ball to move. If the player caused the ball to move, we're going to see that under Rule 9.4b to find out if there is a penalty or not. Playing incorrectly substituted ball or playing from a wrong place in breach of Rule 9.1. It's going to be the general penalty under Rule 6.3b or Rule 14.7a. We talked about that in multiple rule breaches resulting from a single act or related acts under a 1.13(c)(4. If a player accidentally moves his ball and does not replace it and plays from a wrong place, that's going to be considered a related act, and the player would just get the general penalty in that instance. Player would not be penalized also for moving the ball and will not get the one additional penalty stroke for moving the ball. The important thing in Rule 9, under Rule 9, is deciding whether the ball moved and what caused the ball to move. A player's ball at rest is treated as having moved only if it's known or virtually certain that it did, and it might have moved, but it's not known or virtually certain. It's treated as not having moved and must be played as it lies. Player's ball at rest has not moved. Talked about, oftentimes there's an interpretation for that under Rule 9.2A1. We talk about a ball that oscillates and has not moved locations, so it is not moved. It is not played as moved, so it was, it does not, no actions are required. It needs to change its physical location in order to be considered moved. Deciding what causes the ball to move is a big part of this. It must be decided what caused the ball to move. This determines whether the player must replace the ball or play as it lies, and whether or not there is going to be a penalty. There's 4 possible causes. Natural forces such as wind or water, we talked about that. The player, his or herself, including the player's caddy, or the player's partner. The player's partner is treated as having player's partner is treated as the player in this case. An opponent in match play, including the opponent's caddy. An outside influence, including any other player in stroke play. We're going to cover that in Rule 9.6. In Rule 22, we talked about that in partner play. We'll talk about how partners are treated as a side, and actions by the partner concerning the player's ball is treated as being actions of the player. So we talked about this term before, known or virtually certain. We've mentioned that in cases of being balls in penalty areas and so on. The general rule of thumb, well, we'll go to the definitions. I hate doing this, but I will. Here it goes. Where'd it go? Wait a minute, where's virtual certainty? Okay, where's the definition for virtual certainty? I thought there was one.
It's
Should be under
known.
knowledge.
Known.
Is it the knowledge?
NOW.
Page 342.
KNOW.
Page 342.
Okay, go to K's, huh? Here we are, known or virtually certain. Thank you. Here's the definition of known or virtual certain. The standard for deciding what happened to a player's ball. For example, whether the ball came to rest in a penalty area, whether it moved or what caused it to move. Known or virtually certain means more than just possible or probable. It means that either there is conclusive evidence that the event in question happened to the player's ball, such as when the player or other witnesses saw it happen, or although there is a small degree of doubt, all reasonable available information shows that it is at least 95% likely that the event in question happened. All reasonably available information includes all information the player knows and all other information he or she can get with reasonable effort and with unreasonable delay. So it's a pretty high standard to be known or virtually certain that the player has caused or not caused the ball to move. And that's the definition for that. Where are we at? Which number? 9.4, right? We got 9-4 or 9-3. We're at 9-2B, right? So here we talk about no universally certain, and we've gone over the definition of that. So you apply that standard to determine whether or not what caused the ball to move. There might be a lot of questions, and if you're not present on the, there to observe, which more than likely you're not going to be, you're going to have to rely on the players and the players' opponent or the players' other players in the group to determine what caused the ball to move or not move. If natural forces cause a player's ball to move at rest, there is no penalty, and the player's ball must be moved from its new spot. Exception: ball on the putting green must be replaced if it moves after already having been lifted and replaced. Notice that it's not just a matter of the ball on the putting green being marked. The ball on the putting green just marked and not lifted does not own that spot. We talk about the player's ball owning that spot once it's been marked and lifted, but the player does not own that spot if the ball on the putting green has simply been marked and not lifted. So if the player's ball on the putting green moves after the player has already lifted and replaced the ball on the spot from which it moved, the ball must be replaced on its original spot, which, if not known, must be estimated under Rule 14.2. This is true no matter what caused the ball to move, including natural forces. If you play from the wrong spot, you're going to get a general penalty, and if it's a serious breach, you're going to need to correct that where you played from. Under 9.4, ball are lifted or moved by the player. This rule applies only when it is known or virtually certain that a player, including the player's caddy, lifted his or her ball at rest and caused it to move. The ball lifted or moved must be replaced. When a player lifts the ball under a rule to take relief or to replace on a different spot, that's an exception to that rule. Except when the ball moves only after the player has begun the stroke and started or the backswing for a stroke and then goes on to make that stroke. We've already talked about that. It's a penalty now for deliberately lifting or touching the ball or causing it to move. It used to be players were allowed to deliberately touch his or her ball, and that is no longer the case. Some players on the putting green got in the habit of actually touching their ball on the putting green. I don't know why they would do that, but under the current rules, even if they do not cause the ball to move, the player gets a one-stroke penalty. There are exceptions. There's no penalty when the player lifts the ball or causes it to move under a rule that allows the ball to be lifted and replaced, requires a moved ball to be replaced on its original spot, requires or allows a player to drop or place a ball again to play a ball from a different place, or if there's accidental movement before the ball is found under the searching rule. And again, on the penalty, there's no penalty for a ball accidentally causing the ball to move on the penalty green, no matter what the cause. There's accidental movement anywhere except on the putting green while applying a rule. So if you're applying a rule, say you're finding a player taking relief. Oh shoot. There's no penalty when a player is accidentally causes the ball to move anywhere except on the putting green while taking reasonable actions to mark the spot of the ball, to replace it, or when allowed to do so under the rules, to move a movable obstruction. We're going to go with that under 15.2, or to restore worsened conditions when allowed to do so under Rule 8.1. Also, notice that when taking relief, including when determining whether relief is available under a rule such as swinging a club, to see if there's interference from a condition. So if you've got a player that has interference from an immovable obstruction and you're trying to help that player find his nearest point of complete relief, and the player swinging the club to determine whether or not he's free of interference, and he happens to hit the ball and moves it accidentally, there's no penalty under this exception. Player's going to be taking relief. He's taking relief under a rule, so there's no penalty. And also in measuring or under a rule, whether to determine order of play, the ball moves, there's no penalty for that as well. We're up to, there's some good interpretations under Rule 9.4. Especially I want to mention 9.4B/6. Well, we'll go there. Where's my cursor? In the case when a player lifts a ball under a rule, say for abnormal ground condition, that allows free relief, but then decides to not take free relief. This may happen if the player has already picked up his ball and he's got it in his hand, and then he calls you over for help. The player then decides that he doesn't want to take free relief because he doesn't like the situation that the player may have to drop into. After lifting the ball, but before doing anything else, the player has the following options. Replace the ball in its original spot. He's going to get a 1 penalty stroke. Replace the ball in its original position with a penalty of 1 penalty stroke, with 1 stroke penalty, and then take relief under Rule 19, unplayable ball relief, and he's going to get the player will get an additional penalty. The player can take directly relief under Rule 19(2)B or C without replacing the ball and using the spot where the original ball lied to determine the reference point for the relief procedure, getting a penalty of 1 stroke under Rule 19(2) and an additional penalty stroke under Rule 9.4B for a total of 2 penalty strokes. The player may drop the ball under Rule 16(1)B and either play the ball as it lies without penalty or using the new position to determine the reference point to take relief under any other options under Rule 19(2), getting a penalty of only 1 stroke. Or in the case of the only way to avoid getting an additional penalty by taking stroke and distance relief, if the player does take stroke and distance relief without dropping the ball under Rule 16(1)B, he gets his penalty stroke only under Rule 19(2)A and no penalty under Rule 9.4B, as the player does not need to establish a new reference point before taking relief under Rule 19(2)A. That's stroke and distance relief, so the player is not going to be penalized any additional penalty stroke. We're going to keep going and try to finish Rule 9, okay? We may not get to a quiz today. Or if you want to stay over, I've got a good quiz if you want to stay over. We'll do 9.5. Rule applies when it's known or virtually certain. When the opponent lifts a player's ball, causes it to move. The opponent, if the opponent player plays the player's ball, it's a wrong ball and it's covered under rule. It's not under this rule. The player is going to play a wrong ball. He's going to lose. It's a general penalty. The player it's a loss of hold penalty. If the opponent lifts or moves the player's ball at rest, the ball must be replaced on the spot, or if not known, estimated, except when the opponent is conceding the next stroke, a hole, or the match, or the opponent lifts the ball or moves the ball at the player's request because the player intends to apply a rule to take relief or replace the ball in a different spot. The penalty for the opponent doing this, touching the ball or causing it to move, it's going to be a 1-stroke penalty. There are some exceptions. The opponent is allowed to lift the player's ball when conceding the next stroke, a hole, or the match, or the player does it at the player's request. A exception. There is an exception if the player marks and lifts the ball on the putting green by mistake. There's no penalty. The player is absolved, and the player, the ball would be replaced. If it's a mistake and if the player marks that ball by mistake, if it's a mistaken belief, that is the opponent's ball. There's no penalty. Exception 3, the same exception as for the player. There's no penalty when the opponent accidentally causes the ball to move while taking any of the actions covered by exceptions under exceptions 2, 3, or 4 under Rule 9, 4B. Penalty for playing an incorrectly substituted ball or playing the wrong ball from a wrong place is a general penalty under Rule 6.3B or 14.7A. 9.6. Last section in Rule 9, ball lifted or moved by an outside influence. If it's virtually certain the ball is moved by an outside influence, there's a definition for that, including another player or stroke play. There's no penalty and the ball must be replaced on its original spot, which if not known must be estimated. This applies whether or not the ball has been found. So there is a case where it's virtually certain that another player in the competition has played a player's ball. It's virtually certain that the player's ball plays that ball, and the original ball has not been found by the player. The player is going to be allowed to substitute another ball without penalty and play it as if that is not a lost ball situation. But if it is not known or virtually certain that the ball was lifted or moved by an outside influence and the ball is lost, the ball must be taken stroke and distance relief under Rule 18.2. If the player's ball is played as a wrong ball by another player, that is covered under Rule 6.3C2, not by this rule. The penalty for breach is incorrectly substituted ball or playing from the wrong place. General penalty and multiple breaches go back to Rule 13C4 again.
Question.
Go ahead.
I was just looking at for the exceptions. I didn't see this. I've had the experience with it though, where player A's ball is hit into the general area. It's at the edge of penalty area. The other ball hits a screamer and knocks the ball into the penalty area. Player B knocks player A's ball into the penalty area.
Okay, another ball would be an outside influence, right?
Exactly. So player A would be able to replace the ball on the spot or as close to the spot as can be determined with no penalty and play on.
That's correct. Yep, you got it. And the ball who struck player's A ball, that ball is played as it lies.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. 9.7. Ball marker lifted or moved. Ball marker pretty much refers to the same thing as a ball. The player's ball marker is lifted or moved in any way. It's replaced in the same manner that you're replacing a ball. You replace either the ball on its original spot or the ball marker on its original spot. And the penalty for lifting a ball marker or causing it to move, 1 penalty stroke. If the player or the opponent in match play lifts the ball marker, causes it to move, there's going to be a 1 stroke penalty if it's intentional and not accidental.
Greg, that's a good reason not to use a magnetic ball marker, especially if your partner is going to tap down your mark.
Now that might be considered accidental. So that would probably fall under the rule of accidental movement and would not be a penalty. But it's a good point though. Any questions on Rule 9? There's a lot of cases out where the ball moves and players are going to be asking for help. And you're going to need to determine, first of all, you're going to need to determine what caused the ball to move, and then the factors that that come into play in determining that, and whether or not it's going to be penalized or not. Okay, there is the USGA has some good under their education section of the rules. They've got a good, they've got a short course. They've got short course on the rules. They put together some good quizzes, and some, I know some people have taken them and some haven't. They had 2 seasons of this. And in season 1, we're going to quickly go through a rule. There's a round 3 had a quiz regarding ball lifted or moved. We're going to quickly take this quiz, and there's materials here. You'll see the quiz stats, there's questions, and also the answers. We're going to go through the front 9 questions. There's 9 questions. And we will, if you're still on the call, we're going to go through these quickly. The problem will be, I'll have to, well, we'll go through these and we'll throw out the answers. Number 1, believing that your ball on the putting green, believing that your ball lies on the putting green, you mark its spot and lift the ball. You then realize that the ball was not on the putting green. What is the ruling? A, there's no penalty and the ball must be replaced. B, there's no penalty as long as you did not clean or lift the ball and the ball must be replaced. C, you get a 1-stroke penalty and the ball must be replaced. D, you get a 2-stroke penalty and stroke play and the ball must be replaced.
C.
C. Okay. Number 2, in which of the following situations do you not get a penalty? Do you not get a penalty? A, when attempting to mark the spot of your ball on the putting green, you drop your ball marker on the ball, causing it to move. B, you lift your ball from the putting green, but forget to mark its spot first. C, in preparing to make a stroke at your ball in the fairway, you accidentally move it with your club head. D, while your ball lies in the general area, you deliberately touch it with your club, but it doesn't move.
A.
Okay, number 3, your approach shot comes to rest on the putting green 15 feet from the hole. Another player's approach shot then hits it and moves your ball to a spot 20 feet from the hole, and you see this happen. The other player plays from where his ball came to rest, and you also play from where your ball came to rest, 20 feet from the hole. What is the ruling? A, you proceeded correctly and get no penalty. B, you get a 1 penalty stroke in both match play and stroke play. C, in match play, you lose the hole, and in stroke play, you get 2 penalty strokes. D, in stroke play, you get 2 penalty strokes, and you must play from the original spot before starting play of the next hole. If not, you are disqualified.
C.
C.
Okay, C. 4, true or false, when your ball has been moved and you are required to replace it on its original spot, you get a penalty if you lift it from its new location without first marking its spot. A, true, B, false.
False.
Say false.
Okay, B, false. 5, in 4 ball, you see a ball in a general area that you believe to be a stray ball. You lift the ball and then realize it is your partner's ball. What is the ruling? There is no penalty to you and your partner, and the ball must be in the ball. There's no penalty to you or your partner, and the ball must be replaced. B, you get 1 penalty stroke and the ball must be replaced. C, your partner gets 1 penalty stroke and the ball must be replaced.
B.
We talked about this. This is kind of a tough. We're getting
B.
B.
No,
B.
it can't, it can't be. It's whoever ball is involved gets
Okay,
the
we talked-
penalty,
okay.
if it's a penalty.
It's a penalty. There's a penalty. Who gets the penalty? The player or the partner?
Partner.
The player whose ball is involved.
Right. C.
Because, okay, so that's C, right?
Mhm.
because you lifted up your partner's ball, and then you realize your partner's, so you don't get the penalty, the partner gets the penalty, right? C. 6, in stroke play, you and your partner are walking together to your tee shot. As your partner is approaching his ball in the rough, he accidentally kicks and moves your ball a few inches. Believing that the requirement to replace the moved ball is like other relief procedures, you replace another ball on its estimated spot and you make your next stroke. How many penalty strokes do you get, if any? 0, 1, 2, or 3?
2.
2.
These are too good. 7, before playing your approach shot from the general area, you decide to change clubs. You toss the club you were holding towards your golf bag, but the club strikes the bag and then strikes and moves your ball. What is the ruling? There is no penalty and the ball must be replaced. You get 1 penalty stroke and the ball must be replaced.
B.
Stroke. B. Quick.
B.
B.
Are you waiting for in stroke play? You get 2 penalty strokes? You're gonna stick with B? Okay, B. In match play, your opponent plays from a green sign bunker. And the ball comes to rest 3 feet from the hole and on your line of play. While your opponent is raking the bunker, you mark and lift his ball without authority. What is the ruling? A, there's no penalty and the ball must be replaced. B, you get 1 penalty stroke and the ball must be replaced. C, you lose the hole.
B.
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 B. True or false? During your backswing for a stroke from the fairway, your ball starts to move, but you continue your swing and make the stroke. If you make your next stroke from where the ball came to rest after playing the moving ball, instead of replaying the stroke, you get the general penalty for playing from the wrong place. True or false?
False.
False.
False. You know what? I never took the, I didn't have the right.
What are you looking for? The second 9?
No, I didn't have the right. Well, wait a second. Here's the quiz. I'm gonna, those are the answers. Well, anyway, you got them all right, people. Very good job. Thank you for attending. Next week, we'll start on rule number 10. But I do encourage everybody out there, especially the new volunteers, to use the materials available to you on the USGA website. You've got rules quizzes that we talked about. I've also introduced to you under education, they have short quizzes. You've got season 1 and 2. You can go through those. They have, you'll find that the different quizzes are here. They have, quizzes are broken down into front 9 and back 9 for each quiz. The front 9 quizzes are your more basic quizzes. And I encourage you, if you really want to delve deep into the rules, take the advanced things. Don't expect to do well. Just take your best shot. And I'm sure you'll learn quite a bit. Okay?
And as a reminder, the Zoom link is the same for all the sessions. So if we sometimes send out emails, but if it slips our mind, the link is the same in all the emails we've sent previously.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the nice 61-degree weather coming up, even though it's going to be raining. We'll talk to you all next. I'm not sure who's going to be conducting next week, but I know one thing. It won't be me. So there you go. Good luck. You'll have more fun.
Good job, Craig. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
You get a break from me
Good
next
job,
week.
Greg.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone here.
All
Thanks for
right.
your help.
All right. Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
Where are we at here? Stop video.